presentation, we have Adam to my left, who is from Wellington Water. I think you're all very familiar. Adam's been working very closely with me on this project, and also actually the entire family of Wellington Water. I seem to have been emailing them every day for the last few weeks. So if there are any technical questions, either Adam can help answer those, or we can take your questions and take that back to Wellington Water. We also have Robin, who's obviously from South Wairarapa District Council. Robin is leading the Three Waters reform work, and also has a lot of overview to all the major projects that are happening within South Wairarapa area. So this is one of maybe 5 major projects that are occurring. They are all, I would call them all significant in the purest sense of it. This is a major decision around the future of the Greytown drinking water, and for today, but also into the future. These are decisions that I think you don't take lightly, because these are infrastructure projects that could last for 50 or more years, as assets can get maintained for that period. And just to note that while you'll see in the presentation that there is a regulatory aspect to the upgrade to the infrastructure under the new Te Mata ROI drinking rules and regulations, this is also about making sure that it's fit for purpose for the future. So welcome any questions throughout the presentation, or you can leave them to the then, entirely up to you. Thanks, Robin. So really the purpose of the workshop today is to capture your feedback on any feedback that you might have about developing getting your feedback so that we can develop the consultation material and also present that to council for approval, so that we can go out for consultation. The direction that you provided us previously is that you had heard the feedback from the existing water infrastructure sites that's in Soldiers Memorial Park, but you wanted to provide the public with alternative options, and that's essentially what we're presenting to today. And once again, we're particularly interested in the options considered, the engagement plan, and also the stakeholder list, and if we've got that right. Next slide.
But just confirming, previously these conversations have all been public excluded, but we're now open to the public. This is an open workshop, and we're getting ready to start this work publicly with the consultation.
Thank you. So next slide. So in this presentation, I'm just going to take you through just the general background. I guess you will be familiar with this information already, but it's important as it is, as the Deputy Mayor said, that it is public information. So I think it's important to give the background information to this. We're going to talk about the drinking water needs of Greytown and how that fits in the bigger picture, the reserves management plan, which is critical, and probably part of that early engagement feedback that you heard why the public may have said and provided that feedback, options we're considering, how we're going to engage through this process. Next slide. So generally speaking, the background to here is that we want to make sure that we have fit for purpose infrastructure for Greytown that is accessible for everyone every day. And that's a really important aspect of this. So the current drinking water treatment plant in Soldiers Memorial Park, as I said, doesn't meet the current water standards. It requires an additional filtration system to do that. And that meets the multi-barrier approach that Te Mata ROI has asked all councils in New Zealand to meet that standard. But also, on top of that, the council did approve an easement under Section 48 of the Reserved Act in Soldiers Memorial Park in 2021. So that's just for the infrastructure piece. It's important to note that the infrastructure has been approved by the council to do that. However, following this, it was identified that a new board would be required. And so that hasn't been approved by council, but you've given direction to officers to consider this as part of the consultation, but also alternative sites. So Wellington Water requires a new drinking water bore as the primary source for the town. And the council's basically requested that officers consult the public about the new bore and whether that be in Soldiers Park, Memorial Park for somewhere else.
Can I ask them?
Yes, councillor.
Okay, thank you. I just, out of interest, the new bore is required for the volume or for the quality of the water? What is?
So I think I've got it a bit later on, but essentially the bore is at risk of failure.
Oh, okay.
It's at the end of its useful life.
Yes.
Yes. In fact, past.
Oh,
the end of
okay.
its useful life.
Thank you.
And as I'll show in the presentation, the need here is that if it was to fail, there is a backup water supply for a minimum period of time, but it would not meet the pressure requirements for fire and emergency. In other words, we maintain or support a large fire. So this consultation aims to provide council feedback from the community, the necessary information to make an informed decision. And that decision is a challenging one, as you'll see, because it's relating to how much people will pay, but also that we can meet the requirements as well of the drinking water standards. And part of that, we also need to consider the Soldier Memorial Park Reserve Management Plan, which we'll get into in a bit of detail. Next slide, thank you.
My answer for that one, sorry. Robin?
So the drinking water needs for Greytown. This is a map from some earlier work that you've probably seen before that shows how all our waters are connected up between Featherston and Greytown. Essentially, we have the main bore in Memorial Park, Soldier Memorial Park, and that supplies the majority of the water to the town. Adam's clarified with me a number of things with this, as this was quite new to me. Essentially, the Wahine treatment plant supplies the majority of the water through to Featherston and is potentially a backup. However, it cannot be upgraded to meet the requirements of Memorial Park, not because of its facility, but because of the connection.
Can I ask a question on that?
Yep.
How is it that a plant in Wahine can provide water pressure to Featherston for firefighting miles and miles and miles away, and you can't provide pressure to Greytown when the water pipe was upgraded 3 years ago from the treatment plant all the way down to Featherston?
So the clarification I've sought on that, because I asked a similar question, is that it is in fact the piping network from there to the town, and also when it receives into the town, cannot provide the firefighting pressure that's required. So yes, it can provide an emergency backup but a reduced service.
It doesn't answer my question how it can do it to Featherston, which is 5 times the distance.
I thought when we had this conversation early on, when this first came up and we had the first lot of consultation, that it was about the size of the pipe. I remember having a lot of discussion with.
I know, but we upgraded it.
But I'm sure the response from Wellington Water was that the pipe was upgraded, but the size and the capacity doesn't really meet the requirement.
Adam, do you want to?
Yeah, if I'm wrong, right?
I guess Lawrence Edwards, it would be best, our Chief Advisor of Water, to probably respond to that. I know he has spoken to council on that before, so if we need to just pull together some more information around that again.
I think, I think Melissa's recollection is right, that
We needed to put an inline pump or
it was
something.
like we did part of it, but not the whole part. And
It could have been bigger and.
could have been, it didn't.
It's also been raised by the chair, Louise, of Greytown, and so I specifically asked that. But what we can do is provide you a write-up to explain that in more detail, because I think it's a very valid point. And as part of the consultation, we can make that very clear why that isn't a possibility.
So the pipe to fix this bigger.
I don't know if it is.
I don't know, yeah, I don't know if it is, because we did upgrade the pipe 2 years ago.
To clarify that, but certainly an option considered and an option currently not on the table. So let's bring that back to you and we can clarify that. Thank you.
So, and I think just to note, on the slide where it's got the link to the story map, that story map is what was used to, we had an online workshop around this. That story map is fantastic. It talks, like you can scroll through and it can explain all the background of all of the infrastructure that we've got. And it specifically talks about in Featherston, Bush Reservoir, and there's a comment with there saying the Bush Reservoir supplies drinking water to Featherston. And I think that part of that is it's the storage and the
Elevated.
that provides the pressure to Featherston. You can bypass that if we need to take that offline for maintenance and use water that comes from Waihini, but it's the pressure from that tank that drives the pressure in Featherston.
It's that tank we stood on,
It's elevated.
it's that concrete tank we stood on, that's, doesn't have much life.
But my understanding of why we couldn't feed straight off the Waihine system into Greytown was actually to do with the nature of the pipes themselves, that they're not, I recall somebody saying they're not actually suitable for the sort of pressure.
That's my understanding.
Fine. But what that makes me wonder is, could we not have a reservoir right next to Greytown that we do put suitable piping into the system? And really, if our problem is the firefighting arrangements, all that reservoir has to be is kind of sufficiently big with a good margin to cope with how much water do you need in a fire emergency? Anyway, Robin, you've thought of that like a cloud.
Right through you, the chair. We commissioned McDonald to do a extensive study on water supply for both Featherston and Greytown. In that study, they identified where we had pressure, where we did not have pressure, and they presented to us I think a 30 and a 50-year plan of options and the preferred options. We can make that study available to you again, but they looked at all options and came up with an investment plan for our long-term plan processes we've been using.
Sorry, I'm a little bit confused and possibly a little bit frustrated. I thought this workshop was to discuss the consultation, given that we have had multiple meetings and our staff have worked through various iterations of options, long lists, short lists, and we've voted and moved forward and got to a point where I thought we were ready to go to consultation, and a lot of the questions and discussion seems to be going right back to the beginning of that process and kind of almost feels like litigating this whole situation again, which I feel like we've covered really strongly, and I for one would just really like to be future focused.
So my understanding was that we rejected the Soldiers Memorial Park. That was when we had those hearings, obviously, so that was rejected outright. What we did do is send Wellington Water back to look at alternate sources of water, for instance, where it could be pumped rather than using Soldiers Memorial Park.
But
so this is what we're doing now.
The most recent meeting, Wellington Water came back to us and said, here's your three options. And we, because of logistics and costs and whatnot, we said we would consult on the options. So Soldiers Memorial Park is one of those.
Okay.
Plus, what are the alternatives? So what I'm saying is, can we move that conversation forward in terms of consultation rather than going back to
I know.
looking to litigate how we got here?
Through the chair, if we can move to the next slide, that will go then out.
So, and I understand where Melissa's coming from there. The one thing that I'm fully annoyed with is, like Colin said, at those hearings, the public said they don't want it in the park, and we voted against it. Yet Wellington Water keep trying to push it back on us.
To be really clear, that consultation was decided that it was incredibly flawed. And when we say the public said, I think from memory, we had 3 people submit. So we haven't had
No.
You may well be right that when we go through this process, the community may, fully reject this option. But to my mind, this is the fulsome consultation that gets us to a point where a really substantial percentage of the community have a say, so that we can say the community want X, Y, or Z, because I don't feel like we've got that.
When have we had a hearing that has a real substantial census of the.
Well, three submitters isn't.
Genesis.
And Louise has got a hand up.
I think Janet's got a point.
My recollection is that what you asked Wellington Water to do was to go and find alternatives to measure against Soldiers Memorial Park. Because they had put that as the third option, and you asked them to go and find alternatives, which is this is. And then when those alternatives have been identified and we have got down through the analysis to 3 options, we would consult. So I don't think it's necessarily fair to say that this is Wellington Water's pushing Memorial Park. They're not. They're looking at the 3 alternatives and looking for feedback on those 3 alternatives in terms of not only the cost but the ratepayer implications.
We'll go to Louise then, Alistair.
Yeah, I just want to comment on that consultation part. The consultation wasn't made very well known to the community, and Wellington Water was meant to go into the community and consult with people and get opinions, and they didn't. At that hearing, because once became aware of those hearings, there was many members of the community who came from different areas who, because they weren't able to file submissions, weren't able to communicate, but they were there clearly supporting the fact that they did not want a bore going into the Memorial Park. So to say that you haven't heard from the community in a group, I would greatly disagree with that, because you had individuals from different groups there, and we had allowed additional individuals, people to be there. RSA was there, you had the community represented there, you had other people from the parks there. So you cannot say you have not heard from the community about this. The community is united in this. So to go back and ask again to the community is going to wonder why council's not listening to them.
This is about Louise. Just
I said I'd ask Alistair. Alistair?
Yeah, so look, I'm comfortable with the 3 options that are here. I've just got a couple of questions about how we got to a certain place and the options that we paid for. I quite like the idea of a targeted rate at all. I'm not sure, can we do that for a water asset? Say, oh, because we're not doing this, we're doing this instead. We're going to target a particular, because and the same topic will come up.
And it'll come up with
the same topic will come up. Featherston, can we do that, or is that sort of, because if we do this for, and I suppose just thinking out loud, if we do this for Greytown, which is potentially, arguably, debatable, a more affluent part of our community, and probably could afford $200. I don't know, but and people tell me that Featherston is not as affluent. Yet the price, if we do this targeted thing, the cost to potential ratepayers in Featherston may be different. And the same argument will go in Martinborough. And it strikes me a little bit that if we start going down this rate of targeted, which I don't have a fundamental problem, but what it could do is it could actually create a perverse outcome, I think, in our community, that where you have less affable part of a community may find it more difficult with a targeted rate. Because if you open up this door, you don't know where it leads. That's the only comment. So I'm not quite sure how we got to there, because we certainly didn't discuss targeted rates.
Through the chair, can we just go through the presentation? We will come to that slide. And I'm happy to run through these reasonably quickly around the options considered to get to that item.
I just want to check whether Councillor Maynard wanted to make a comment. Oh, okay, go for it.
Thank you. So yeah, just
I have to use this to do my scrolling, so it may look like sometimes I'm putting my hand up, but I'm actually just scrolling with my.
Just a couple of points on comments. South Wairarapa District Council, we will be leading the consultation on this with support from Wellington Water this time. So it's just important to note that we're going on a larger engagement program for this to try and engage the community. Just to the point that Louise mentioned, yes, we acknowledge the feedback that's already been received for Soldiers Memorial Park as well. So in other words, they've undertaken a technical review of this. We can share this with you. I think you may have seen this before, but basically it talks about what are those options that are available comparatively to Soldiers Memorial Park, which is essentially looking at an alternative site within Greytown. Next slide, thank you. Once again, just reiterating what Louise said, when these options were option was considered for this, these are the groups that were engaged with who provided feedback to us. Next slide, please. So part of that consideration, Wellington Water looked at 11 potential sites, so have been quite broad in their analysis in terms of options. And this is the comparative options for consultation, which is, and appreciate that there's already been comments around Soldiers Park, but it's important to mention the pros and cons of this. And as Councillor Plummer has already mentioned, cost is a factor that needs to be considered. So in terms of these three options, which is Soldiers Park, there's obviously, you've got the treatment approved there, and in terms of costs, you know, it's more affordable in terms of the options, but those cons are parks management plan, the location of the bore until that's identified, and then also construction disruption. Option 2 would be council yard, which you'll see that option coming up later on, and that's the pros of that would be removing it from the reserve, so more closely aligned to the parks management plan. Land owned by council already. The cons here is obviously the men's shed, but possibly could be relocated back on the same site or a different site. There's also any ground leasing, but I understand, not only learning that yesterday, there's not really ground lease, there's one on the site. There's the construction disruption, moving of infrastructure. Now, the affordability of this, and I'll show you in another slide, actually comes down to a dosing pipe that already exists near Soldiers Memorial Park. It's 400 metres long, and I'll show you this in a map. That is the major cost difference, is that a new dosing pipe for chlorine would be required to be built up and down the road nearby in order to deliver on that infrastructure. The third option is purchasing new land. We haven't showed you any of the land options in this because it's private and in confidence. But that would be another option that would be available, is to purchase new land. And once again, benefits are more closely aligned to the parks management plan, but once again, more expensive in terms of having to purchase the land outright. Next slide. Thank you. So in terms of that dosing pipe that I talked about, this was something that I worked quite closely with Wellington Water to identify and explain that. I think it's important to mention that that piece of infrastructure already exists there and would have to be built on any new site. And it's about a 400-metre long pipe that the water runs through, and the chlorine is dosed and treated before it goes out and into the main drinking water supply. Yes.
Just ask a question probably for Adam. Do we know if there's a lifetime on that dosing pipe? Because of due to
I don't know exactly what age and condition that pipeline is. That's a good question. It will have a finite life for sure. Wouldn't be surprised if it was probably constructed at the same time as the treatment plant in Memorial Park.
Because if that's something that's going to have to be upgraded or changed in the next 10 years, that might affect how we go anyway.
Great question. We'll follow that up.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next slide. So option 1 is obviously Soldiers Memorial Park, and I wanted to share with you the management plan. You may have already seen that, but I just wanted to note that this is the management plan. While the management plan could be changed, is really what the council's commitment and agreement with the public was when it was first established. And so you already have in a relationship with the public in regards to this. These are the principles of the park that you agreed with the public generally. And just to note, line 38, all new utilities shall only be located in the reserve where there is no alternative location in the other site. It doesn't mean that you don't have to do that. It just say that this is the agreement you generally had with the users of that park.
Just a quick question on that. Is this upgrade of the bore, is that considered new or a renewal of existing? So does the upgrade, is that governed by 38 for new utilities or not? I guess is what I know. As a new bore, and then therefore we must look at excluding all other alternatives.
I would say that it's probably, because you've asked about consultation, it's probably irrelevant because you're deciding to either put it here or not put it here. You could say it's renewal. You could say it's new, but it's probably irrelevant because it's still a utility and it's still within the park. So Yeah, it's a great question. I've even sought legal advice on it and got the legal opinion and read through that. They refer more to the Reserves Management Act than this plan because it has more legal holding than the plan itself.
So what does that mean? So the Reserve Management Act, are we allowed to do this, or is there a long consultative process that we must go through?
So what we'll do is that regardless of what the outcome of this is, we are going through, and you'll see it come up later on in the slides. We're following a consultation process that will meet the Memorial Parks requirements, the Reserve Management Act, and the Local Government Act, and that requires us to do hearings as part of the process.
So we'll do an SCP, a special consultation process.
Okay, next slide. So in terms of option one, if you were to look at the reserves management plan, these are the areas highlighted in green and in bluish, purplish, that we wouldn't be allowed to build the utility on, because if you're taking a purist view of it, these are the areas that are either recreational or memorial. And so that's why you can see that the existing infrastructure is basically built where it is and where the new infrastructure is as well. So if there was to be a new bore, it would have to be located somewhere in that. It doesn't have to be, but if you were to follow, the agreement, then that would be the area. Next slide. Once again, you've already seen the slide, the existing one and where it's been improved infrastructure. Next slide. So option two is the old Borough Council yard at 89 West Street in Greytown. The men's shed, of course, is currently located there, may be able to stay on the site, the existing site, because it's quite a long site. But as Adam's told me, there's actually an existing water pipe on the northern part of that site. So we couldn't have the infrastructure or the bore on the northern part. It would have to be the southern part of that site. Obviously, the advantages here is that council already owns the site. It's already within the catchment area of the water table that's under the ground. And it's also could be a secure site as well in terms of
Say north, this it goes east-west, not north-south.
I guess that's for the image. And it's a water race. Sorry, just for clarification.
Okay, so
thank you. Yeah. So in that image, sorry, it's
that's right where the men's
correct
smoke room is effectively. Right. Okay.
So that would be option two. Next slide. And then option three would be purchasing land somewhere within that water table. And as you can see, I haven't published where those sites potentially could be. Next slide. So back to Councillor Plimmer's comments. How much would this cost? And this is a big part of that decision-making process. And part of the consultations will definitely go out with figures. This is based on the pricing range that Wellington Water has given us, plus also internally includes a depreciation cost here. These are just draft figures for now, and obviously they'll be continued to be worked on, but it gives you a bit of a range. So I guess the principal decision that you could make or consider is that because if we were to upgrade the existing infrastructure on the existing site to the district targeted rate, because this is the cost to maintain the existing infrastructure.
Can you let Bob Louise in, please?
So the base cost of that, if we were to take it to Soldiers Park, is between $66 to $80 per ratepayer per year, and that's to upgrade. The second part would be option two, the council yard. So the district targeted rate would stay the same, so that'd still be $66 to $80. That's what everyone would pay in the district. But Greytown would pay a larger targeted rate to make up for the difference.
Just, there's two things here, and I've not seen this slide before this morning, but there's two sets of options for option two and option three. So I think we just need to be clear. You currently charge district wide, so everyone pays the same. 66 to 80 for option one is everyone would pay. If they were still doing district wide for option two and three, option two would be 116 to 136, and option three would be 122 to 146.
District wide.
Option two and three on this slide only come in if you want to keep the 66 to 80 for everyone else in the district, and then target the increased cost of moving it to either option two or three to Greytown only. So they would still pay the 66 to 80, but they'd pay No, the 214 includes the 66, so that they would pay more because of the decision to move, just to be clear.
So everybody,
I'm really confused last night about what option was what and what.
yeah, so everybody, regardless of option, everybody would pay the 66 to 88.
Yeah.
But if we go with 2 or 3,
You have the choice to do district-wide 2 or 3,
or
or to target grade 2 and 3.
So if we went targeted rate, coming back to my original question, would that create a precedence that we would then have to follow for all these other?
For Martinborough and for.
You could have
I'd
that
be very
conversation.
cautious.
So that's my caution there, because you never know where this might lead.
It was raised at a previous meeting in terms of what the additional cost and why should everyone else pay if they want to move it to a more expensive option.
I don't have, fundamentally, I don't have on a philosophical view, but I'm just worried where it might lead us.
You need to set a precedent.
Yeah, it does set a precedent.
Yeah.
But the other question to this, coming back to Rebecca's question, the 60 to 80, that doesn't include if we have to upgrade the treatment. So perhaps we need to compare apples with apples a little bit. If you're right, Adam, it's going to have to be replaced sooner or later, and that might just sway the balance a little bit.
Yeah.
Public opinion.
Yeah.
So I guess just picking up Alice's point, what the precedent would be is that if there's an option which the whole district is going to pay for, but a particular community want a gold-plated version, then it would be that community pays the additional cost for the gold plate.
The logical one is Martinborough wastewater treatment plant. If it's going to Plainfield, we have to buy another whole farm or whatever. That's, that's the logic, isn't it?
That's what the precedent applied.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing is, does that make it incredibly more complex for staff in terms of, a whole rate system? Targeted rates for different areas.
Really, because we don't have any at the moment, and there's some places that have so many targeted rates, like 20 or 30 within the district. So to really to put one on each town, like.
But if we start this and it really means anything which one of our districts,
One of the towns.
benefits more, this has got to be considered.
no, it's not about benefit. It's about if there's an option that works, but a particular community of any wants an increase or an improvement or an upgrade, then the precedent is that that community pays for that upgrade. It's not about, if it's not saying that if Martinborough needs a wastewater treatment plant, they have to pay for it. It's saying if they want something over and above.
Yeah. No, but I didn't use the right semantics, but that's what I mean. That means that we have got that consideration to make every time one area wants an upgrade. We have to that just makes, I mean, it might be the right thing to do, but I'm saying, I think it's got an occasion.
Yeah.
Everson master plan is a prime example.
Yeah.
Everson ratepayers pay for that, or is everyone?
What we're trying to articulate is if a certain part of the community wants a more expensive option to solve a solution. Then there's a reasonably practicable solution. That's when it comes into play. But if this was just a general upgrade, then it would just be normal, everyone would pay. But if that upgrade for the community, for that community is not acceptable and they want to go to plan B, then should everyone else pay for that is the question.
So exactly.
Your master plan has got things in, so they would be part of the district. It's part of your spatial plan.
Yeah, so what I'm asking, thank you for articulating, I can articulate very clearly. But is that a lot more work for the staff? I mean, how many options are there going to be like this? And suddenly, does it mean every time we're looking at the cost of something, we have to look at this?
If you look at the Greytown, this instance, when you look at the people of Greytown, that park to them is like the Martinborough Square. So you've got to do the expensive option here for your lighting and everything because of the square. It's no different than there. And we're at the moment got a bore that the public never wanted in the first place, but previous council staff went and done it without consultation, just went done without telling anyone. So it was lumped on the community with no one even knowing. And that bore was only ever supposed to be a backup. It was never supposed to be a primary supply. So instead they went, took all the primary supply first, and now Greytown's lumped with a thing, so.
Did you have a?
Primary supply was always to Featherston.
Sorry, I just, on the slide here, I just wanted to remind councillors that in the paper that was presented to you, previously, there is also risk, more risk around options 2 and 3, because we know less about, once we start doing the investigations. There's a timing risk and there's also a complexity risk, that somehow we'll have to also articulate within the consultation. Those numbers could be more or less, there's a risk.
I think, may I just say then, I have some concerns with regards to that, with the fact that, and I do apologise, Adam, but with some of the things that with Wellington Water, we need to make sure that when we go out to our public, that you guys have really checked your numbers and that what they are paying and what we're saying that they're going to be, you know, targeted with doesn't blow out. Because as what has happened over well, even with us, even with the South Wellington Upper District Council, so our numbers, we just need to make sure have kind of been checked and rechecked, so we have a good.
Through the chair, I think the only place that they can have reasonable certainty is where they are. The other 2 options are going to have unknowns. It doesn't matter how.
I think we need to say that then somewhere, do you know what I mean? I think it needs to be in there somewhere because, yeah.
There will be things that
Sure.
are not
I wanna make sure.
considered that could crop up, especially in option 3. That could make a very big difference to them. And it wouldn't be fair to hold Wellington Water's feet to the fire over that, because until they start the investigation, you won't know.
So one question, Adam, I don't know if you've got thought about it, but that dosing line you've got for them, 400 metres. That's quite a long section. Is there any thought gone into actually just running the pipe up and down the middle of the section? So it's a lot cheaper to put in.
Well, the other, as part of the cost estimations was in terms of the chlorine contact time, because that's the outcome we're trying to achieve is chlorine contact, not a pipe. The pipe is one way of achieving that, right? So another way of doing so would be putting in a contact tank. But I don't know if it really changed the cost estimate that much. At the end of the day, there's a certain time that the chlorine is.
Running a pipe up and down that section is going to save you probably 50 grand in bloody traffic management, if not more anyway, in the first place. And it's going to be a lot easier and simpler to do than do it out the road.
I think with a lot of these estimates as well is there's been a little bit of conservatism built into them. So we'd rather show you slightly higher end numbers rather than, like you say, we're going into optimistic. So, you know, if for example, the cost estimate, I haven't delved into the numbers between, say, the contact pipeline and a tank, if one's slightly higher, then the estimates include the slightly higher estimate, right? But yeah.
Thank you. So just a couple of things to point out. What I'll do is I'll update this to include a district-wide cost for options 2 and 3 as well, which we put out as part of the consultation. I guess it's then in the principal aspect that as a council, you need to decide on whether it should be paid for by a district target rate or a combined option as well. And just on the points that's already been noted, and there's a couple of little notes there that there's already previous capital works and the investigations into the new bore at Soldiers Park would essentially, what Wellington Water is telling us is that it would become what is capital costs at the moment potentially could become operational costs because we haven't seen the life of that asset to an end. So there's a potential cost there. The other one is that, and as has been alluded to, option 2 and 3, a feasibility or investigation into those options has not been conducted at this stage. So while we're consulting on alternative preferred options, they still need to go through feasibility. So there would be another phase after this, and anywhere between $80,000 to $110,000 to undertake those feasibility studies.
The figure?
80 to 110. So yeah, on the slide there. Okay, Robin, next slide, please. So in terms of significant engagement, looked quite broadly across a wide range of things, including the Reserves Act as well. And so what we've decided is that, yes, it is a significant consultation process, month-long consultation along with the hearings, but it's all to hear the public's views, working alongside the first of all, my comms team, but also the Greytown chair, they've asked not to take place the consultation during the representation review. And I think that's a smart idea. So what we'll be doing is that, next slide. Thanks, Robert. So that process then will essentially kick off around the 9th of September, which is just after the end of the representation review. What that gives us actually is the ability to engage with the Maori Standing Committee and talk to them about this, but also the Greytown Community Board through workshops. So it just gives a bit more time to flesh out these options and talk about the consultation. And then once we've done that, we'll pull together the consultation materials and reporting, present that to the Strategy Workshop Committee on the 4th of September. As I said, 9th of September, kick off that consultation. Because of the significance of it, we're putting a bit more weight into the process to try and engage with more people in regards to that. And we'll set up the documentation online. Obviously, there's a lot of background information to this. There's a few sensitive documents. We'll have to go through and have a look at them as well before we release them. And that's mostly to do with property purchasing. But once again, online survey, really keen to get that out through your networks and others. Consultation boxes as usual, set out at the main locations, email notifications. We'll start doing some social media releases. Keen to do a day at Soldiers Memorial Park as well to engage with stakeholders there in more of an informal type setting, which we know that there are a lot of stakeholders to the park. And then we'll go through the stakeholder engagement, which is the next slide. Consultation will close around 6th of October, analysis and report writing, and then we'll bring it. We have deliberations, report, and then the hearings, followed by the 13th of November Strategic Working Committee. So that's the plan at this stage.
One of the issues that was raised by a number of the submitters was the fragility of the pool, given that it's not a reinforced concrete pool. And the vibration of putting the board down could cause damage to it. Have we done any more work on that at all, Adam, in terms of the potential damage to the pool through vibration?
Not at this stage, because we didn't want to progress any further options until council.
So when we're
going to progress with.
That's fine, but so when we're talking risks, Robin, we need to incorporate that as a significant risk, because now this is a pretty important historical pool really for people back down, and of course it's not reinforced. So you imagine the outcry if we put a bore in there and it vibrates and it cracks. Well, who's going to repair it?
Yes.
So, and that was a big issue that was raised as part of the hearings in November.
Agreed. However, it's not going in the pool area. That's absolutely not happening.
Councillor, I know that there's been a previous presentation to the council that included that as an option. As you'll see in the map, I've actually graded that out. So at the moment, it's not a consideration. Wellington Water, I've asked them to come back to us with a potential other location. Whether or not you want to share that location, because it is sensitive in terms of water supply to a city, it's up to you. You have the discretion to do that. But it will be somewhere else within that area that I highlighted in the map.
But I suppose given that there's some reasonably smart people in Greytown who will look at this, they probably want to know where you're putting the bore, and they might be able to make assessments on these things as well. I think it's fair.
Yes, I've asked Wellington Water to come back with a preferred location, and at that time we can have that conversation.
Put your fingers active.
Looks like now. So if there's a way, like during this consultation, I think it'd be really, really successful if each of the councillors, Greytown councillors, and possibly like with the community boards and all councillors actually, but like whoever can be involved, but kind of run by you guys, having spaces where people can come and meet with you to discuss this. Like really, I think because I'm thinking ahead too, because Featherston's going to need it, Marlborough's going to need it. I think all of those things really need to be run by us. You know, like to really push to have days where people can actually come to speak. and there's not really anything there with
Absolutely
regards
welcome.
to that.
I'll definitely add that in. Thank you.
And the other thing is with the engagement plan, I think Papawai Marae needs to be on there. You just so they're in the loop and they're not mentioned at all. And I think they probably come ahead of Greytown Country Village Heaven, to a degree, but you know, like they should be on there and not just be considered as all residents because they are mana whenua and we're talking about water. So,
The point.
yeah.
In the, not sure which slide it is, but you've got 9th of September consultation opens. Can I suggest you include the Greytown Community newspaper as part of that list as well?
Grapevine.
I also wonder in the engagement plan, I mean, part of the discussion that we've gone through today, so it'll now be public knowledge, is that depending on future options, potentially the cost might affect everybody in the district. Do we not need to make sure that everybody in the district is therefore part of the consultation plan or the engagement plan, sorry, even if Greytown itself is the focus?
Absolutely.
Mm.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Has to be because of the district-wide rate, it has to be the district.
Yeah, just people are aware.
Yep, we'll have that. We expect to have that this will have a reasonably significant reach. So yeah, we'll gather that feedback.
I think you make a good point, though. This is a Greytown topic, but it is equally and importantly a South Wairarapa topic.
Yeah, because people within the district are going to need to start thinking about these things with regards to targeted rates on certain things that we may be looking at in the future to try and keep bettering our district, you know, in what ways we're looking at putting these things in place, what it means, the money.
And something related to my experience with Three Waters consultation, when it really was Three Waters, is that people often don't have a good understanding of how their water is paid for. So funnily enough, the most virulent anti-Three Water people that I ever spoke to were all rural residents who would have never been affected by the costs. So somewhere in the document, we need to sort of emphasise that water services are paid for by water users. And to the extent that I suspect a lot of what we decide now may will be superseded by new water entities. In actual fact, the whole thing may end up quite quickly being a volumetric payment system anyway. So to the extent that we can indicate, you know, future developments are likely to be happening at the same time, which who knows what might happen. But I think we need to be clear that the future is uncertain.
Through the chair, we can definitely talk about, I think your point about who pays for water and how that happens in the district, because it's quite different, I guess, to the others. In terms of legislation that hasn't passed yet, probably a broader conversation and an LTP conversation. I just wouldn't want to muddy the water too much because this is the current structure that we get paid. It could be delivered by a different agency. We might mention that maybe, but I guess it's just what we're is, and I just don't want to add too much information if that's all right.
Understand that. I thought your last page looked sort of very straight to the point, gives very simple options.
Through the chair,
it should be well received, I think.
Yeah, through the chair, what we'll do is we'll also add in that pricing question. Yeah, and specifically around should it be paid for by the district or paid for locally or special decision making. So that's probably the only thing that's missing from that final page. But yes, if we can try and keep it as simple as possible for people to understand and know what their options are. I think it's good.
Do you need to add connected to council supply because living in Greytown, they may not be connected?
Yep, good point.
I think that needs to be in there as well.
It's probably the key question, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yes, I think that would be asked.
So are we able to have that, the story map link? Are we able to have that on our council website?
And what it does, I don't know what else.
Yeah, the story link is really good, and I do recommend
It's
that elected members have a look because it gives you the background to the infrastructure. I think it's a good background if people want to find more information, and I'm keen to include it in some of the consultation. It won't be a major feature, it'll be if you want more information about
click on
the
that.
assets.
Yeah, I think, as it was prepared specifically for our region, and it also gives a lot of the legislative background, so back to, so it goes back to like 2019 and changes, but, yeah, the information is just so rich. It seems a shame that we're not using this for more education for councillors and for the public, I think.
Oh, look, thanks, Rob, and well done, and thank you also, Adam. Thank you, Robin. I think everybody's made significant contributions here, and we look forward to the next stage, and good luck.
Thank you very much.